Welcome to the Crafting Character Podcast. Steve Carter here in association with my good friends at Preaching Today and Food for the Hungry. I bring you a podcast that hopefully helps you get better at the craft of preaching and teaching and communicating while always ensuring that your character leads the way. Well, I often will kind of have the chance to interview some amazing preachers and communicators. And then sometimes it's authors. I'll read a book or I'll talk with a therapist, and I'll be like, man, you what you just shared, we have to share with the Crafting Character fam and community. But if you're like me, what has been happening in the Middle East has just it's just gut-wrenching. It's heartbreaking. And oftentimes I know when there's a moment that something is happening in the world, I want to say something, but I often don't know how to say and how to talk about it. And then I watch a bunch of people on Instagram or unfortunately even in churches talk about something, but they do it in a way that doesn't feel healthy and honest to the entire conversation. And so this is what we're going to do today. So we're going to try and really learn about what's actually happening in the Middle East from a dear friend, someone that I absolutely love, respect. He is a thought leader when it comes to what has been happening in the Middle East, especially with Israel and Palestine and in Gaza. His name is Jon Huckins, and he leads an organization called Journey Home. He's an author of 3 books. He's actually the one, if you've been following along over the years, you know that last year I went on the Camino, hiked it. It was with Jon, and Jon is an adjunct professor of New Testament at Point Loma University. Just an incredible guy. And so we're going to chat about this, and then we're going to talk about, okay, then how, when you know this and learn about it, how do you actually bring this to a stage on a Sunday morning and to help your people be informed well and know how to pray well and get involved well, as well as talking a little bit more about the importance of pilgrimage. So without further ado, the one, the only, my dear friend, Jon Huckins. Welcome to the Crafting Character Podcast, my friend.
Yeah, man. Good to be with you, Steve-O. Always a treat.
Yes. All right. So let's just jump in. How did you get involved with the Middle East? Because you've been doing some stuff there for, I mean, gosh, it has to be a decade plus. But how did you get involved?
Yeah, actually, it was finishing up my seminary, my master's at Fuller, and had the opportunity to go to study the historical context of Jesus in the Holy Land, which like kind of academic nerd in many ways. So it was dream set up pre us having the 4 kids we have now. My wife and I went together. And long story short, we went to study the historical context of Jesus and the towns and the stones and what interrupted our learning, but actually accelerated it in regards to what the way of Jesus looks like, was bumping into the people on the ground and being invited into a geopolitical situation that we were very naive towards, quite honestly. And in our very elementary understanding, we began to meet Jews, Christians, Muslims, Palestinians, Israelis that were committed to walking the way of peace in the midst of violence and conflict. And it started to break open paradigms and theologies. I mean, I'll never forget standing on the rooftop of our hotel in the old city of Jerusalem in the Christian Quarter, which you've been there as well, overlooking Herod's palace, my brain full of biblical knowledge and data and archaeology. And this gentleman who I had met who served our meals each day, and we began to strike up a conversation, asked me to hang out one evening. And I say, sure. So we're overlooking Herod's palace, talking about like the World Cup was that year. We're talking about having kids soon. His wife was also pregnant. My wife was 6 months along with our first. And he turns to me somberly and with a slower cadence than he had been. And he said, Jon, why do your people think I'm a terrorist? He said, I live just over there. He points across the separation wall into the town of Bethany, which is the town where Lazarus was raised from the dead, ironically, a place of resurrection. And he says, I follow Jesus just like I do. How can you pray for your meals every morning and go look at all these holy sites in Bethlehem and Jericho and Galilee and be completely blind to the plight of your brothers and sisters in Christ? And that was the moment for me. I think one of many conversions where I had to begin to interrogate the theology I inherited as a Western Christian pastor. And I had to ask some hard questions around, why is it that I've never inherited any kind of theology or practice for peace? Because right now my brother is saying I'm actually I'm perpetuating his oppression rather than contributing as an instrument of peace in his reality. And that doesn't align with the gospel. And so, that was what jumped us into it. And then him and his wife became a mentor. We discovered that he worked at the hotel we were staying at because they were trying to make enough money to run a nonprofit that taught reconciliation among the next generation of Palestinian kids in Bethany, and began to bring groups over there 13 years ago. And it led to the organization I co-founded at the time, Global Immersion.
Now, you have this moment and you end up getting on a plane and coming home. And peacemaking becomes like almost this central formation practice of discipleship for you.
Yep.
Talk about that, because again, when you go through a peacemaking journey, and you and I, have a very massive respect and love for John Paul Lederach, and had the privilege to spend time with him. He's a professor at Notre Dame, but like just a guru on peacemaking. But as you go through that practice, man, you start to realize your understanding of reconciliation, holding multiple stories at once.
Yep.
That's not what we were trained and taught to do. So talk a little bit about that, like, because you even write about this in Mending the Divides. You talk about this with the Good Samaritan story, and it was so beautiful about how to do this. But talk about the difficulty with it, and where the breakthrough began to happen for you.
Yeah, I mean, the difficulty was there were so many obstacles that I had inherited subconsciously to me even taking peace seriously, quite honestly. Like, I grew up in a very conservative Christian home that had a certain theology and politic, and that very much informed our understanding of Israel and how that was paired synonymously with biblical Israel. So in that context, it was already muddy. So there was a series of obstacles I had to jump to take peacemaking seriously. Theology, like many of us, I inherited a dispensationalism. Things have to get worse before Christ is going to return. So peace is actually antithetical to the mission of God. That's a big problem. Culturally, it was stigmatized as kind of this fairy tale unicorn 1960s thing. Good luck with that. That's not going to actually do anything to change society. And then it just wasn't practiced very much. Like, it was in the churches that I was part of and saw and experienced around me, like a theology and practice for peace or peacemaking wasn't fleshed out. So there was just an absence of it. What I knew was, on experiential level, and this is the power of pilgrimage or proximity, is that what was happening, the status quo was not the way of Jesus. So if the way of Jesus is not what I experienced there, but what I experienced when I walked with Malad Manar as they walk down their village and all the kids run out of their homes and grab their legs because they are seen as beacons of trust in the midst of a very polarized neighborhood, Muslim and Christian. And they're bridge builders. They're like, the gospel turns 3D. I'm like, oh, there's something there. So then the opportunity became, how do I learn that? How do I study that? People like John Paul Lederach and his idea of conflict transformation. Like, maybe conflict isn't a problem to fix. It's an opportunity for healing. And if you look at it that way, that's the story of God in the Bible. It's a story of restoration. God's mission is to restore what's been broken. So how am I participating in that and being changed along the way? And so then it just, when it begins to infect, I had great mentors. Dr. Glenn Stassen was my mentor in just peacemaking at Fuller. And now my PhD advisor is David Gushee, who studied in the way of Stassen. So it's just like, I'm discovering a faith beyond so much of the deficiencies, and it's enlivening, but it's also very challenging, very costly, and very countercultural still to most American evangelicalism.
Yeah, no, I think it's really, really good because, even like the word reconciliation, we are ministers of reconciliation from Corinthians, Paul writes. And always, for me, it was always evangelistic. Oh, I'm trying to reconcile you back to God.
You
But
bet.
then as you begin to recognize, oh, racial reconciliation, or you begin to actually walk in the West Bank, or be near Gaza, or walk with in Tel Aviv, and you begin to hear the stories, you start to recognize, like, oh my goodness, I'll never forget this secular Zionist in Israel was just saying, Steve, the immigration of Christians out of the Middle East, like, it's not good. Like, they're a glue to help peace and shalom actually be embodied and happen. And I had never thought to myself, like, oh my goodness, like, wow, like, our ability to walk this out is actually, that's the bridge building, like, to be able to do that. And oftentimes in conflict, for many of us in the West, it's, we're either going to power up or we're going to run away. Mm-hmm. And I recognize in so much of my life, I run away from conflict, or I power up. And here, just beginning to see, and you've been such a brother for me in this, as others have been, is this, there's a third way. Yeah. There's a way to walk this out. Yeah. Let's just get really, really practical. Cause I think one of the ways it's tricky too, is when it comes to Israel, I think there's a lot of people who are afraid of, oh, if I say something bad, will I be considered, anti-Semitic? How do I differentiate between what's happening in Gaza and what's happening in the West Bank? How is the U.S. involved in all of this? How, like, there's just the geopolitical, as you said, the contextual, it matters. Yep. So kind of talk about how you make sense of all of this, if you don't mind.
Yeah. I don't know if any of us have made sense of it, but we can have some tools for how to think about it.
Right.
The first thing, honestly, and I say this for myself, but I would ask all of us listening. I think in these moments, we do often get triggered and we bump into the fight or flight. Like, I'm going to go in and just like start stalking people around me, or I'm like, this is too confusing, I'm checked out. I think what we first need to do is to, rather than default to our inherited ideology, which just kind of pits us against each other, is to slow down and get as proximate as we can as fellow humans. Like, we have to lament the ancient spiritual practice of lament. We need to cry and weep and feel whatever we can, the human tragedy that's unfolding right now. And beyond any ideology, on a human level, and we can call it a Christian call or conviction as well, we need to understand the trauma that lies behind these people groups. I mean, the Jewish people, obviously, historically, have been so oppressed and targeted. And some of the smartest thinkers in my mind about that region talk about a collective PTSD they carry. And that, of course, can inform actions and overreactions, and maybe underreactions. And then the trauma of the Palestinian people who have been in this land. I mean, the community in Gaza is one of the first Christian communities dating back to the first century. There's 1,000 of them left there. And they have been a beautiful symbol and sign of peace in that area. And now, like you said, they're leaving en masse because they've been displaced multiple times. And many of them are already refugees and wondering if they're ever going to make it home. So there's this, we need to get close to the pain, the human pain. And as we do that, I think it begins to like get our heart a little more proximate to this rather than just our head and the talking points. And then I think if that's our starting point, we can look at the bigger story. Like, what is the story going on here? Why are they doing what they're doing? Why is Hamas killing seemingly innocent Israelis? Why is Israel continuing to drop bombs, killing majority Palestinian citizens, women and children being also a majority of that population? We have to think about this with nuance, and we have responsibility as leaders, and especially if you're a preacher or teacher with that influence. This is not one of those issues we can walk away from, because Christians have been marbled, especially evangelicals have been marbled into this conflict from its conception. And ultimately, last thing I'll say, Steve, we have to think about the way of Jesus in this. Like, the moment we're like, yeah, keep nuking them, or yeah, they deserve it, or where's the way of Jesus? If Jesus came to bring life, not death, we have to think about this, at least a ceasefire, stop killing each other. and so we can gather enough information to say what's a more diplomatic way forward, and how are we as the church contributing to that?
I think it's really, really powerful because, and you said it earlier, you have to start with the theology, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that theology, but that theology can't just be in a classroom. That theology has to be proximate to the pain. And I remember, my first time walking this out was 2009, I believe, there. And I'll never just forget, like, recognizing that collective PTSD. The way I heard it was this, because of the Holocaust, 6 million people, just nobody cared. Yeah. Nobody really cared. 6 million people died. And you live with an existential threat that at any moment we have to care for ourselves. No one has our back. You have Iran saying we're going to decimate you. So that collective PTSD is, and it's such good language, is in the body. Yep. And then on the Palestinian side, I remember I had a similar conversation with a waiter when we were leading a conversation, and he pulled me aside and he's like, "You really care about this?" I'm like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "How does it hit you?" And he goes, "We have a word in Arabic, is fish mustaqbal, which means we have no future." That's how we feel as Palestinians. Yep. So now try to have a conversation and get proximate to the pain, where you have a group of people, rightly so, who have collective PTSD. Yep. And then you have a group of people, rightly so, who feel we don't have a future. And then try to go, what's the way of Jesus here? Mm-hmm. And I think the closer I got to it, and you began to recognize, gosh, there was a lot of unlearning I had to do. I mean, I heard people say things like, "Oh, the Palestinians, you spent time with them. Aren't they the Philistines of the Bible?" And I'm like, no. But you could see what was ingrained in people's mind to almost think a certain way, and how quick it was to default not to peacemaking and to the way of Jesus, but to a side. Totally. And how did you protect yourself from that?
Well, and then the other big one too, Steve, I'm glad you mentioned that, is so many of us inherited this understanding that the modern nation state called Israel is synonymous with biblical Israel. And so we begin to kind of cloak our Old Testament theology on this modern nation state and give it unreserved support, when in reality, like, the people of Israel is a collective of human beings. It was never intended to talk about it as a nation state. And so we can theologize our way to give permission to the modern nation state called Israel in ways that are antithetical to the Jesus we follow. And so those are some things we have to unlearn, as you said, on a theological level. Something I found that I struggled with when I first started dabbling on this issue is you begin to think you know everything right away. Like, oh, I'm finally awake to it. And I come back overly activistic. Not that the activists have their role, especially prophetic ones, but we can start to call all of ourselves prophets at times because we think we figured it out, and so everyone needs to hear, which just basically I think is an inflated ego oftentimes, or it's out of a guilt that we haven't woken up to this earlier. So one of my struggles was checking that and not communicating in an economy of shame, like, hey, all you bad evangelicals, we've missed the boat on this one. And had some good feedback and had to say sorry a lot, and then began to learn the more effective way to communicate and even honor the people in the Holy Land is to share stories of my formation, starting with myself. Here's ways that I have had to wake up and confess and repent and live differently and think differently and theologize differently, but through the lens of those that are there. Like, I mean, the last 2 weeks, this has been horrible, and it's looked like a lot of text to our friends there. And I even wrote down a bunch of, like, if we need to center the people there, we're going to hear from people like Omar, who lives in Bethany. He said, really, brother, I was just checking in on him. It's difficult. It's definitely a difficult time to be alive here. I still believe in God, and he can get us for peace and love. And then he says, I miss dancing with you, bro, and singing. I'm without a job and have no permission to work. Like, he's trying to construct a hope out of a memory of when we used to dance in his backyard when we go over there. But he also has no hope for tomorrow. Milad, he's this gentleman who I first met, who invited me into a deeper story. He says, we are still strong in dreaming for free souls and independence. Liel, an Israeli, said that he just hopes this is the last cycle of violence they have to endure. And he described that 2 of his colleagues from his college were kidnapped in the Hamas raid on October 7th. So they're just like, they're holding hope, but they're feeling all the pain. And that's where I think we have to center ourselves in these moments.
So good. When you're on the West Bank side, and the separation dividing wall, there's a lot of graffiti, but it's like prophetic, Banksy's, done some stuff. But one of the central kind of messages often is around hope, or this lack of hope, and you'll see things like keys that represent homes from the Palestinian side where they hold their key, but a settler came and took over their home. Mm-hmm. You'll see stuff where like olive trees that have been like now just cut to just stumps. Yep. And we went to Dawood's house, and you drive into his property, and it says, we refuse to be enemies. It's just so beautiful. And we took a bunch of people from California, and we planted olive trees. Yeah. And I'll just never forget this. I looked at Dawood and I said, Dawood, when will these olive trees produce olives? He's like, 10 years. I'm like, in my mind, I'm thinking, 10 years, will you have this land? Yeah. I don't know. Like, will you? And he goes, we have to prepare. We have to have hope. We have to believe. We have to keep making beautiful things. And to see in the face of that, and I saw it from the Israeli side of people who maybe had lost a child to violence. Yeah. Talking with a Palestinian parent who lost a child to violence, and they were just begging, there's got to be a different way. Yeah. There's got to be a different way. Yeah. I think there's oftentimes where this like almost myth of redemptive violence, where we know that what Jesus says, but we don't like those verses, and we think that people have to pay. Yeah. And you've walked this out with people, and you asked such great questions. When you find someone who, and for many of us pastors, we know people in our congregation, we feel like we're like dancing around landmines who might have this passion, like they're going to pay, and we're going to, 77 times they need to pay, and we actually think it's okay. What questions do you ask, or how do you try to address that redemptive violence in a more Jesus kingdom kind of way?
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, it's the first question is, what are you scared of in many ways? What is it you fear? It seems like the most zealous, holders of that ideology are fearful of something, or seeking to protect something, which some of those instincts can be beautiful. Like, we're trying to protect our families. We're trying to protect what we understand as a nation state that could be under threat, whether it's Israel or the U.S. And then to get curious with that. Because if you walk down that path long enough, you'll realize that is not a path that's actually going to lead to a sustained peace. And it's certainly not going to lead to a sustained peace in any of us. I mean, when you extinguish the life of another out of our need to defend something, I think that unmakes us who we are intended to be in some way. It deforms us. And so I think choosing the we refuse to be enemies path of Dawood is actually forming us, or reforming us into the way of Jesus that can actually reflect hope in the hopeless situation. I mean, I even think of like the ways that in our pulpits here in the States, we can talk about, hope is X, Y, and Z. Talk about hope in a context like we're describing in West Bank or Gaza or Israel. You have to construct that hope, because everything around you says there's no reason to be hopeful. So you plant olive trees, or as my friend Manar said, we dance in the kitchen. Like, what are ways we can walk with those people who just believe that redemptive violence is the only way? Empathize with the pain that's fueling them, and then invite them into a vision beyond that and say, this is like, I actually think, and Daoud reminds us of this, the construct of enemy is a construct we place on people. If we refuse to be enemies, then we actually don't have enemies, because we choose not to place that construct on them. They're my brother, they're my sister, they're my co-image bearer. That's going to disrupt our redemptive violence paradigms real quick.
Yeah, no, that's so good. You've been in some of the largest churches. You have, spoken or served, and you have, sat in churches like all across the country. When I was at Willow, you came out and did some stuff with our teams. And when it comes to these moments, how do you wish a pastor or a preacher would talk honestly about this? Because I think sometimes it's we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's we go to social media and it's just like a simple pray for Israel, which we saw, and we forget a whole other side. Sometimes it's our theology of redemptive violence comes out. What's the way at which you go, gosh, I wish people would be able to, in 3 to 5 minutes, articulate in this way, or take people on a journey this way.
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing I would hope for, and I would try to practice myself, is to, as Thomas Merton says, to disarm any violence within myself. If I'm going to disarm the ideologies of my congregation, I need to disarm the ideologies in myself, such that I'm not just coming off as combative and producing another set of binaries for people to argue about. If we care about the way of Jesus transcending those, then I have to be prepared for that. So I hope every pastor would start there. I watch some pastors that have gone on the Holy Land tours that are constructed to celebrate one narrative and others on another narrative. I personally bend towards one more than the other, because I think it's on the side of justice and Jesus. But how we talk to our congregations has to come from a starting point where we're co-learners, and we're not doing it because we have to win. We're doing it because we think this is the faithful next step. I think another thing I would hope every pastor considers is, one of the best definitions I've ever heard, and I know this word can be triggering, heard of the word privilege, is it's simply the ability to walk away. Some of us in our suburban churches could be huge, could be an urban center where the Israel-Palestine issue is not, we have so many other issues to worry about. It's a privilege to walk away from an issue like this, that our friends that we're describing don't have the ability to walk away from. And so we have to ask ourselves the question as leaders, what does it look like to leverage my influence for the sake of justice in this moment, for the way of Jesus in this moment? Or where do I need to lay down my influence or my privilege, if you will, so I can amplify the voices of those we need to hear from? And then be courageous, because honestly, I empathize with those pastors. It's going to lead. Blessed are the peacemakers is part of our sacred text at the start of the Sermon on the Mount, as is blessed are those who are persecuted. And I think there's a reason they're back to back in some ways. To be a peacemaker is disrupting a status quo that's not allowing peace to come about, and you're going to get in some trouble potentially among those that maybe are holding on to an ideological binary stronger than you are.
Well, and I think that's so helpful, and I think for many of us in our congregation, and even for someone like me for many years, I have that sense of Peter, you cut off that soldier's ear, you know what I mean? I gotta protect, I gotta defend, I gotta, he thinks he's actually doing the right thing.
Yeah, he does.
And Jesus looks at him and is like, my man, you've been with me for a few years. What are you? This is not what this kingdom is about. If I wanted to call down power, I could call down power. I have that ability. But I'm the guy who rolls in on a donkey. I'm the guy who talks about peace. I'm the guy who, when I showed up, when I'm showing up post-resurrection, I'm going to say, peace be with you twice. I am this kind of rabbi. I'm different. I'm different. And I think there's so much we love about Jesus until it gets to this form of discipleship and peacemaking and the construct, to your point, of we refuse to be enemies.
Yeah.
And here's where I think you have been such a profound is, I mean that, gift in my life, because there's been moments I thought I was going to learn about Israel and Palestine, but it was actually a journey home. Like I thought I was like going to follow in the way of St. James, the apostle who brought the gospel to Spain. And I was like unmade and remade. And on this journey home. I think one of the ways that we've gotten away from, and we can all have a hot take here or there, and but we've lost this sacred art of pilgrimage. And I think that pilgrimage often will put us in proximity to pain. And talk about this, because you started this organization that's doing amazing work to really invite leaders on this journey home, on the border and also in the Camino. Talk about that, because I think that is so necessary. If pastors are going to be able to like sit well in the conflicts, they got to learn to journey home.
You bet. And it was a gift having you on the Camino last year, my friend.
Bro,
what a treat.
An amazing moment. Gosh.
The journey home is a metaphor that we are all invited to journey home to our hearts, that we are to journey home to our identity as ones deeply loved. There's nothing to prove. And a lot of our systems and structures, especially for those of us maybe listening that are in pastoral leadership and evangelicalism, said, you are what you do. And even around social justice issues, if you read enough books on this issue, if you talk it a certain way, if you get enough in your head, then you're enough, or you might qualify. In my observation, being in ministry now for 20 years, and the last like 13 focused on faith leaders specifically, is that if we're to actually engage these kinds of issues, like what's going on in Gaza and Israel, we have to begin by engaging the conflicts within ourselves, that we have to be grounded in our identity and confront the conflicts, disarm the violence within ourselves before we begin to perpetuate it in places of societal pain, like we're seeing in Gaza, or in our marriages, in our congregations, in our leadership teams. This is like when I read Jesus in early parts of Luke, before Jesus' formal ministry, he's baptized and God says, you are deeply loved. You're my blessed son, my child. Like before he did anything, he was loved. And that was the core, that was his home. He began his journey home there and then had to live out of that. And then soon, passages later, he's like getting chucked off a cliff by his hometown, like the people he loves most, who constructed his identity. And he's able to stay grounded in his understanding of as one deeply loved, to be able to continue his ministry in the Galilee and beyond. Like, what would it look like for people like you and I, especially in the case here, we are two dominant culture men, to confront the wounds in ourselves before they confront and shatter those that we love? How many times do we have to look at the headlines and see another pastor did X, Y, and Z, and here's the fallout from it? So journey home, our work is to heal soul and society. What's the healing work we need to do in ourselves, which is why we have the Camino pilgrimage on the Camino de Santiago. Who are the elders that have gone before us who model a better way, an integrated second half of life? And they meet with us monthly over the course of 6 months, which is a gift. And then we walk it out together on the Camino and say, no one cares about my title or my CV or my sermon series. We're collectively moving on a journey of transformation, of healing. And then briefly, on the border, which is where I live in San Diego, Tijuana, we ask the question, what does it look like to be people who engage society in healing ways, create a society where everyone has a home? Because we see the ways that our theology and our politics has screwed things up. What's a more redemptive way? How do we get close? How do we get proximate to the people on the underside of power and say, how do we leverage our influence for our collective healing? So that's the soul and the society piece of Journey Home.
The language is so tight and beautiful, like healing soul and society. and I think, you quoted Merton earlier. One of my favorite kind of phrases that I have taken from him was the contemplative activist. In my activism, living this out, you're going to find yourself in situations like in the Middle East or at the border and going, I can't fix this, which should bring you back home.
That's right.
To this sense of the contemplative of like, Lord, I can't do this without you. And the more that you spend time in that soul, the healing soul, it's always going to propel you out to your neighbor, and there's this beauty in that. And I think the pilgrimage, just the walking and the connecting and the unmaking and the remaking, in this ancient path, and just seeing people from every walk of life, so many different cultures, and having conversations and hearing their experience. But talk a little bit about the what makes the Camino so special to you.
Yeah. Well, it was a big part of my own healing journey. That's the short answer. And really, when I discovered that, like, the primary deficiency for people like leaders like me wasn't more vision or more leadership strategy, it was really a commitment to wholeness. The deficiency in me was like, I wasn't given those tools inside the evangelical leadership structure to journey home and to live out and minister out of that place. And so in 2019, I was flying to give a weekend retreat for a church and had my first like really loud panic attack. And it forced me to confront some deeper wounds that I had heard about. The Camino de Santiago as like one of 3 Christian pilgrimages. You got Rome, Jerusalem, and you got Santiago. That there's some level of mystery and paradox that I need to move into and see what it has to teach me. Like, I feel like I've organized my life in a way where I know what's coming. Maybe I need to get in a situation where I'm put on my heels and awaken to the Spirit's movement, and childhood stuff for it to come up. Like, pilgrimage it's not only an embodied form of discipleship, if you will. It puts you in a place where your hands have to be open because you're not in control. You're just looking for the next yellow arrow. You don't have a MapQuest out. That dated me there. You don't have Google Maps out there. Like, you take the next step and you see what the path has for you. And I could tell story after story of how I was really able to confront some of my deepest wounds, to heal and invite others like you and I to say, let's heal together. Because I think this is the path to healing society. And imagine our churches and our congregations and our organizations' health if we can get healthy. Because we all know that women and people of color are asking us to get healthy so that we can stop. What does the verse say? If we don't process our pain, we'll transmit it. We can do a lot of transmission. And the pilgrimage thing, it just kind of works stuff out on you. It's, I'd be curious for you, Steve, like, you went on the pilgrimage, you experienced it. Why was it loud for you?
Man, there's so many like moments that pop in my brain. I think I had a life that had been architected around achievement. I felt this pressure of, you have a spiritual gift of preaching and teaching.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure that you have leveraged that gift to the full.
Yep.
So bigger is better.
Yeah.
And up and to the right. And to be honest, I through God's help and through mentors and a lot, I achieved that, and yet I got there, and as much as it was awesome until it wasn't. And then when it wasn't, it was like, what do I do now? Do I try to find a bigger room? Do I try to find a bigger space? Like, and all of a sudden I was like, oh my goodness, like, this whole thing has been built on goodness and Jesus and beauty and grace, but also industrial, like, machine and up and to the right. And I just was going, there was a cognitive dissonance that was happening within me, and I didn't know how to process it.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, I was in the kitchen and you texted me, and I just picked up wrote back, and I'm like, whatever you're in, I'm in. Like, and then we started chopping about it.
Yep.
And I think there's probably 3 just very, very quick bullet points. One is every person that you meet on the Camino, you just say buen camino, which is like the good way. It's just a good way. And it's just so awesome. And you're finding these yellow arrows. And everybody told me, travel lightly and you won't need as much as you think you do. And all you had was your backpack. You're just like walking. And I think I need all of this. I think I need the recognition. I think I need this. I think I need this.
It's good.
And in the journey home, you just realize like, oh, I just need the belovedness.
Yeah.
I just need the crew of people in my life who aren't enamored by X, Y, or Z, but just are enamored by the reality that I'm a child of God. Like, and having that safe space just to laugh and cry. And then you told me this, and I didn't believe it or understand it, but you said when you decide to do the Camino, your Camino has begun. Yeah. And I'm like, what? You know? Yeah. And all of a sudden it was like you're opening yourself up to this spiritual pilgrimage. And I will tell you, I had significant unforgiveness that was brought to the surface and significant holy moments of like literally naming a couple people who have deeply wounded me and saying, I love you.
Yes. Yes.
And it was like, I was even shocked I said it. And it was actually on my 43rd birthday in that monastery on the spiritual variant. We went, they had a little service and we went to the cathedral. It was beautiful. And I'm just there and I just started weeping. And I just was like, oh my goodness. Yeah. And your healing soul and healing society, you return from that place. How am I not a better preacher and better pastor, better father, better husband, better disciple? And it was, top 3 most transformational experiences of my life. I mean, just like, and it's not like I have a ranking. It's just like, I have 3 that just were boom, just it for me. And so, any of you who just know in your soul, you're like, man, I think I need something like that. Go to journeyhome.info. You can learn a lot about what they're doing on the border, but then also what Jon and the team are doing with these trips. And the secret sauce is it's just not Jon. He brings in some incredible wise voices and sages and guides. And you have these calls and you chop and connection and some of their wisdom. I'm like, it was, just so redemptive and oh man, just so moving. So, Jon, with this though, like when you think about the pilgrimage and you fast forward like a few years, like what do you, because you did it in first time in 2019, 4 years ago. What have you seen that's happened in you? And what do you hope to see happen more in the leaders and the pastors that have chosen to actually endure and persevere and walk out the Camino?
I think it was Parker Palmer who said that the journey to wholeness is not up and out, it's down and in. And that's kind of like what you were saying, the up and out, like the perpetual ladder of ascent. And if that's not wholeness, then it must be something other than wholeness. And if we say yes to wholeness, I hope myself at this front of the line and you and other leaders can embody this this expansive faith that trusts that God is bigger than any of our systems, whatever pulleys we're trying to turn or strings we're trying to bounce up and down, or board meetings or buildings or campaigns. Like, we want to do that work well, but we don't want to take ourselves so seriously to think we are at the center of that world. That's when things start to break down. And so one of my hopes is like, let's open our hearts to the point where we can release control and just be part of the pilgrimage of God's pilgrimage in our world. I hope we can be leaders who are leading with tenderness, who can model a kind of attention to right brain values and emotions and feelings, rather than just our CEO mechanical ecclesial structures that I think have lost their way. Where we can prioritize those relationships and not just our next vision. I hope that this journey home will allow us to be husbands and partners who are less defensive and more curious. It'll allow us to be able to engage society in a way that says, I know this is true to who I am, and I'm going to step forward in this with boldness and confidence. And if I get crap for it, it's okay. I'm still loved just the way as I am. If I lose my position, I'm still loved. If my family disagrees with me and I feel shame about it, God's economy is not shame. His economy is unconditional love. And I can lean into the hard stuff. I can lean into Gaza, Israel in a way where my identity is not on the line, which is going to allow us to actually contribute to the flourishing of our neighbors on the underside of power in ways that are long-term. And that future keeps me up at night, and it's a future I'm trying to live into myself and stumble towards. That to be honest. So, yeah,
friends, I hope you're just heard that, and I think some of you who have been long time listeners of the podcast, but there's something about the Camino. There's something about just hearing Jon share those hopes. There's something about that sense of seeing all of the heartache and heartbreak in our world, but also recognizing there's heartache and heartbreak within you. Mm-hmm. And we can be so busy, and we can climb and preach and lead and drive and strategize our way farther from home. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to really engage the issues of our day well if we can't even confront the pain within. Yeah. And I just would encourage you. I mean, I don't do this. Every once in a while I'll say, hey, go buy this book, but I'm just saying, and I'll say it again, top 3 most transforming experiences of my life. And I think some of you might need a 9 or 10 day pilgrimage with a group of people who are going on this journey. And check out journeyhome.info, and it'll be in the show notes. But maybe just pray about that, and just allow yourself just to imagine, man, what if what Jon was saying could be true in you? And here's the truth. People keep coming up to me now, and they're like, Steve, you're such a better preacher. And I'm like, I don't know how to take that. But what they're saying,
pretty bad before, but you're
pretty bad. I know. Yeah. I'm up into the right. But I think what they're saying is, you can hold the tension. You can, it's coming from a deeper, weightier space. Yep. And I think that is because the soul was starting to get healed. And the soul was starting to get well. And again, like you say, once the soul can start to get healed and the soul can start to get well, man, what a gift that can be to start bringing healing to the societies around us. Mm-hmm. Jon Huckins, you are a gift. Besides journeyhome.info, where else can people find you?
Just on the old social media. Jon Huckins on Instagram, or Journey Home Pilgrimages on Instagram. And
it's journey_home_ pilgrimages.
Let's just say there was apparently a lot of journey homes out there.
I don't. but put that in there. Check it out. I mean, there's some awesome stuff that they're cooking up, and seriously, you're going to want to follow along. Jon, thank you so much for joining us on the Crafting Character podcast. Truly, truly grateful for you, my friend.
Much love to you, man. It's a gift. Thank you.
Well, before we say goodbye to this episode, I just want to try and bring it home just a little bit more. I actually think we have to do a better job of kind of communicating about issues in our world. But sometimes many pastors have reached out to me and are like, hey, like, how do you do this? How do you do it in a way that, is honest, it's real, you're given some clear direction. I know one pastor for many years. He would never respond right away. He'd always wait a week and just sit and try to learn. For some people, that's helpful. For some people, they're more prophetic and they want to like tackle it right then and there. I would say this: I typically don't manuscript when I preach. I do write out my talks, but when I'm delivering my messages, I often want to give a conversation to the congregation. That's kind of like a philosophy for me. My preach is a conversation with the congregation. But there has been a handful of moments in our world where I want to ensure that I get those words right. And so when I was at Willow, there would be moments where I'd just pull out my script and people knew there was some significance that this was different. I wanted to get my words right. And I think you have to recognize, first and foremost, your 3 to 5 minute kind of piece on this isn't going to fix the issue. And so you have to think about, what are you trying to do? And in that moment, for me, is I am trying to help people lift their heads above the noise of the news and media and whatever politics or whatever like unhelpful and unhealthy theology is pulling them or driving them or unmaking them. And I want them to see with Jesus' eyes, with kingdom eyes. And when you can have that kind of perspective, just, that's what we're trying to do. Secondly, is I want to remind the church of our values. If the values that we have to live out the way of Jesus. And maybe for some of you, your values or your mission statement, it's a way to showcase, hey, even in difficult issues, this is the kind of people we're trying to be. And then it differs, but sometimes I am trying to actually attack a narrative that isn't true in the media, that you're just seeing. And I don't want that to actually get into the kind of minds and hearts of my congregation. Sometimes I'm just trying to, hey, here's what we have to say, and we have to say it, and it's wrong and it's evil. And here's sometimes were moments where we just have to lament and grieve. And then there's other times where it's all of that. And that's kind of what it's honestly felt like for the Israel, Palestine, Gaza kind of storyline. For me personally, I didn't share much online. I felt like there was a lot that I needed to learn. Some organizations like Journey Home or Global Immersion or the Telos group are some of my favorites. I've traveled with the Telos group. They are unbelievable. You can learn so much from them. Authors like John Paul Lederach, you can learn so much from them on the heart of peacemaking. But I just stood in front of my congregation at Forest City Church, and I just shared my experience. I talked about the fish mustaqbal, we have no future. I talked about the existential threat. I talked about violence and how what Hamas did, it's heartbreaking, it's evil, it's wrong. And underneath that, you have to ask the question, why? Why are people acting in these ways? And that's where it starts to get into the geopolitical. I started to walk through that. And probably in 5 minutes, I just tried to give a sense of what is actually happening, the best that I could in 5 minutes. And then simply said, we have to learn and we have to be committed to the way of Jesus. And then I prayed. Didn't try to solve anything, didn't try to act and pretend like I knew more than I did. But I tried to really talk honestly about my experience and really begin to pastor people towards that. So, unfortunately, we live in a world where there's going to be more crisis. There's going to be more pain. There's going to be more situations, whether physical and natural disasters, whether political or whether just situations that are happening with uprisings or pain or reactions to violence. This is something that we as pastors have to prepare for, pray that God would give us those words, and then boldly pastor our people towards the way of Jesus. If there's any questions that you ever have, feel free to reach out. My email is steve@steveryancarter.com. I'm grateful for every one of you listening to this podcast. We could not do this without your support, without you sharing and your reviews. It truly means the world. And I hope that as you pastor people through such difficult days, that God would give you grace, God would give you peace, and God will give you words that help your people understand what's happening, not with political eyes, not with what some anchor person's trying to teach us or make us believe, but through Jesus, through the kingdom, and through the way that God longs for us to see our brother, our sister, our neighbor. Much love, everyone. Grace and peace.